The cracked screen of Maya Chen's ancient smartphone flickered as she scrolled through the emergency contact list with trembling fingers. Her 8-month-old son David wheezed softly in her arms, his tiny chest rising and falling with labored breaths that had kept her awake for 3 straight nights. The prescription bottle sat empty on the kitchen counter of their cramped studio apartment, a cruel reminder of how quickly hope could run out when you're counting every penny. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya had already called everyone she could think of. Her sister Jessica was still paying off her own medical bills from last year's surgery. Her mother worked 2 minimum-wage jobs just to keep her own lights on. The local emergency assistance program had a 6-week waiting list, and the pharmacy wouldn't accept another payment plan after she'd defaulted on the last one. David needed his asthma medication tonight, not in 6 weeks, not tomorrow, but right now as his breathing grew, more shallow with each passing hour. In her desperation, Maya found herself staring at a business card she'd picked up from the coffee shop floor 3 months ago. Mitchell and Associates Technology Solutions, with CEO Ryan Mitchell's direct number printed in bold letters beneath the company logo. She remembered that day clearly because she'd been rushing to her second job as a night cleaner at the office building downtown when the card fluttered from someone's briefcase. Something had made her pocket it instead of throwing it away, though. She couldn't explain why at the time. Now, holding David against her chest as he struggled for each breath, Maya understood that inexplicable impulse. Sometimes desperation makes you reach for the most unlikely lifelines, even when logic screams that successful CEOs don't answer texts from strangers begging for money. But logic was a luxury she couldn't afford when her baby's life hung in the balance. Maya's hands shook as she typed the message, deleting and retyping it a dozen times before finally settling on words that felt both honest and dignified. Mr. Mitchell, you don't know me, but I found your card, and I'm desperate. My baby needs asthma medicine, and I can't afford it. I know this is crazy, but I'm out of options. If you could help, I promise to pay you back. Maya Chen. She included her address without really understanding why, then hit send before she could lose her nerve. The message delivered with a soft chime that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet apartment. Maya immediately regretted sending it, imagining some powerful businessman laughing at the pathetic plea, or worse, reporting her for harassment. She set the phone aside and focused on David, gently rubbing his back in small circles the way the pediatrician had shown her, whispering soft reassurances she didn't quite believe herself. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Maya had almost convinced herself that no response was coming when her phone buzzed. The message was brief, but startling in its directness. What pharmacy? What medication? How much? Nothing more. Nothing. Less, just 3 simple questions that made her heart race with sudden, fragile hope. Maya typed back quickly, her fingers flying across the cracked screen. Rodriguez Pharmacy on Oak Street. Albuterol inhaler and budesonide, $127 total. I can show you the prescription if you need proof. She hit send and then sat in the suffocating silence of waiting, David's labored breathing the only sound in the small apartment. The response came faster this time. On my way. Keep the baby upright and calm. Help is coming. Maya stared at the message in disbelief, reading it 3 times before the words fully registered. A complete stranger was actually coming to help her. She glanced around the apartment with sudden mortification, taking in the pile of unpaid bills on the counter, the laundry hanging from makeshift lines, the general chaos of a life lived paycheck to paycheck when the paychecks barely came. Maya spent the next 20 minutes in a frantic attempt to make the place presentable, all while keeping David close and monitoring his breathing. She cleared the coffee table of empty ramen containers, folded the clothes draped over chairs, and tried to arrange the sparse furniture in a way that might disguise how little she actually owned. The whole time, a voice in her head wondered if this was some elaborate joke, or if she was about to open her door to a dangerous stranger who'd somehow tracked her location. When the knock came, it was gentle but confident, the sound of someone accustomed to having doors opened for them. Maya checked the peephole and saw a tall man in an expensive-looking dark coat, holding what appeared to be a pharmacy bag. He didn't look threatening, but then again, she reminded herself, she had no experience judging the character of wealthy strangers who responded to desperate text messages. Maya opened the door with the chain still attached, peering through the gap with David balanced on her hip. "Mr. Mitchell?" she asked, though she already knew it had to be him. There was something about his bearing, the way he carried himself with quiet authority, that screamed successful businessman even in the dim hallway light. "Maya?" he responded, his voice softer than she'd expected. "I have the medication. May I come in?" There was no judgment in his tone, no hint of the condescension she'd braced herself for. Just a straightforward offer delivered with surprising gentleness. Maya hesitated for a moment longer, then closed the door to remove the chain. When she reopened it fully, she got her first clear look at Ryan Mitchell, and he was nothing like what she'd imagined. Yes, he was clearly wealthy, the quality of his clothes and watch making that obvious, but his dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and his brown eyes held a warmth that seemed genuine rather than calculated. "Thank you," Maya said, stepping aside to let him enter. "I can't believe you actually came. I mean, I hoped you would, but I didn't really think." She trailed off, overwhelmed by the surreal nature of the situation. Ryan stepped into the small apartment, and Maya watched him take in the modest surroundings without any visible reaction. His attention immediately focused on David, who was still breathing with obvious difficulty, despite being calmer than he'd been earlier. "How long has he been like this?" Ryan asked, moving closer, with the pharmacy bag extended. 3 days, Maya admitted, accepting the bag with hands that trembled slightly. "It started as just a little cough, but it got worse, so fast. I used the last of his rescue inhaler yesterday morning, and I've been trying to keep him calm ever since." She pulled the new inhaler from the bag, her relief so profound it made her dizzy. Ryan watched as Maya administered the medication to David with practiced efficiency, clearly familiar with the routine despite her obvious stress. "You've dealt with this before," he observed, and it wasn't really a question. Maya nodded gently, bouncing David as they waited for the medication to take effect. "He was diagnosed 4 months ago. Usually I can manage it, but I lost my day job 2 weeks ago. Budget cuts. The cleaning job pays enough to cover rent and basic food, but not much else." She felt compelled to explain, to justify why she'd reached out to a stranger instead of handling it herself. "What kind of day job?" Ryan asked, settling into the single chair Maya had gestured toward. His casual acceptance of the sparse surroundings put her slightly at ease, though she remained acutely aware of the contrast between his obvious prosperity and her visible poverty. "Administrative assistant at a law firm," Maya replied, settling onto the couch with David. "Nothing glamorous, but it had good benefits. Well, decent benefits. Enough to cover David's medications, usually." She could already hear the improvement in her son's breathing, the tight wheezing beginning to ease as the medicine worked its familiar magic. Ryan was quiet for a moment, watching David with an expression Maya couldn't quite read. There was something thoughtful in his gaze, as if he was processing information beyond just the immediate situation. "You mentioned you'd pay me back," he said finally. "The pharmacy bill is covered. Don't worry about it." Maya's automatic response was to protest, to insist that she always paid her debts, but the words died in her throat when she saw his expression. There was a finality to his statement that brooked no argument. But more than that, there was something almost personal about his investment in David's well-being. "Why?" she asked instead. "Why did you come? Why did you help us?" Ryan was quiet for so long that Maya began to think he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested the question had touched on something deeper than simple charity. "Sometimes we get opportunities to make a difference in someone's life," he said carefully. "Not everyone takes those opportunities when they come." It was an answer that raised more questions than it resolved. But something in his tone warned Maya not to push further. Instead, she focused on David, who was breathing much more easily now, his color improving as the medication did its work. "He's better," she said softly, more to herself than to Ryan. "Good," Ryan replied, and the genuine relief in his voice surprised Maya. Most strangers offering charity maintained a certain emotional distance, but Ryan seemed personally invested in David's recovery. "You should have enough medication there for at least a month, maybe more, depending on how severe his episodes are." Maya looked into the pharmacy bag more carefully and realized it contained not just the rescue inhaler she'd expected, but also the preventive medication that was usually too expensive for her to maintain consistently. "This is too much," she protested. "The budesonide alone costs more than I make in a week. Preventive care is cheaper than emergency interventions," Ryan said matter-of-factly. "Trust me, I know." There was something in the way he said it that suggested personal experience rather than just business wisdom, but before Maya could explore that thread, he was standing to leave. "Wait," Maya said, rising quickly with David still in her arms. "I don't understand any of this. Why you came, why you helped us, why you care about a stranger's baby. People don't just do things like this." Ryan paused at the door, his hand on the handle. "Some people do," he said quietly. "You did. You reached out to a stranger when you had no other options. That takes courage." He turned to face her fully. "You're a good mother, Maya. David is lucky to have someone who will fight for him." The words hit Maya with unexpected force, bringing tears to her eyes that she quickly blinked away. It'd been so long since anyone had acknowledged her efforts, had seen past the surface of her circumstances to recognize the love and determination underneath. "Thank you," she managed, "for everything." Ryan nodded once, then seemed to hesitate. "Maya," he said, "if something like this happens again, if David needs anything or if you're in trouble, you have my number now. Use it." Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving her standing in the doorway of her small apartment with a healthy baby in her arms and a profound sense that her life had just taken an unexpected turn. Over the next several days, Maya found herself thinking about Ryan Mitchell constantly. She researched his company online, learning that Mitchell and Associates was a major technology consulting firm with offices in 3 states. Ryan himself was featured in several business articles, described as a brilliant but intensely private entrepreneur who'd built his company from nothing over the past 15 years. The photos showed him at various corporate events, always impeccably dressed and professionally composed, but Maya could see traces of the man who'd sat in her living room, genuinely concerned about a stranger's baby. What puzzled her most was his motivation. Wealthy people donated to charity all the time, but usually through established organizations that provided tax benefits and social recognition. Coming personally to help a random woman who'd texted him was far outside the normal patterns of a corporate philanthropy. There had been something almost urgent about his response, as if David's situation had triggered some personal imperative Maya didn't understand. David's health improved dramatically over the next week. The combination of rescue and preventive medications kept his breathing stable, and for the first time in months, Maya wasn't constantly listening for the telltale wheeze that meant another crisis was developing. The relief allowed her to focus on finding new employment, though the job market remained challenging for someone with her limited experience and education. It was during one of these job searches that Maya encountered Ryan again, though under circumstances neither of them could have predicted. She was leaving an unsuccessful interview at a downtown marketing firm when she literally bumped into him outside the building's elevator. The collision sent her portfolio of resumes scattering across the marble floor, and Maya found herself scrambling to collect them while maintaining what little dignity she had left after another rejection. Maya, preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Ryan's voice was surprised but pleased. He immediately crouched down to help gather her papers, and Maya noticed he handled them with care rather than the impatience busy executives usually showed toward minor inconveniences. "Mr. Mitchell," Maya replied, accepting the papers he handed her with burning cheeks. "I'm sorry, I wasn't watching where I was going. Bad interview," she added unnecessarily, gesturing toward the marketing firm's offices. Ryan's expression grew serious. "Still, looking for work?" When Maya nodded, he seemed to consider something. "What kind of position?" "Administrative, mostly," Maya replied. "Receptionist, data entry, anything that pays decent and has regular hours. I'm not picky at this point." She immediately regretted the admission, not wanting to sound desperate, even though that's exactly what she was. "My assistant just gave notice," Ryan said suddenly. 2 weeks. The position requires discretion, organization, and the ability to handle multiple priorities simultaneously. The hours are consistent, the benefits are excellent, and the salary is competitive. He paused. "Are you interested?" Maya stared at him in shock. "You're offering me a job? But you don't know anything about my qualifications or my work history. I could be completely incompetent." A small smile played at the corners of Ryan's mouth. "Maya, you're raising a child with special medical needs while working multiple jobs and maintaining your dignity despite circumstances that would break most people. I think you understand responsibility better than most." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "This has my direct line and my assistant's contact information. Call Jennifer tomorrow morning and set up a formal interview, but consider this conversation a preliminary screening that you've already passed." Maya took the card with trembling hands, afraid to believe this was really happening. "Why?" she asked for the second time since meeting him. "Why are you doing this?" Ryan was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Because good people deserve good opportunities," he said finally, "and because David needs stability, which means you need stability." He checked his watch. "I have to go, but Maya, call Jennifer. This isn't charity. You'd be doing me a favor by taking the position." As Ryan walked away, Maya stood in the building lobby clutching the business card and trying to process what had just happened. In the span of a week, a stranger had not only saved her son's health, but potentially transformed her entire life's trajectory. She thought about the research she'd done on his company, the articles that described him as ruthlessly efficient and emotionally distant. That man bore no resemblance to the person who'd sat in her living room, who'd personally delivered medication to a sick baby, who'd just offered her a lifeline, disguised as a job opportunity. That evening, as Maya fed David his dinner in their small kitchen, she called her sister Jessica to share the unbelievable developments. Jessica listened with growing amazement as Maya recounted the entire story, from the desperate text message to the job offer. "Maya, this is incredible," Jessica said when the story was finished. "But also kind of weird, right? I mean, who does this? Who responds to random texts from strangers and then offers them jobs?" "I know it sounds strange," Maya admitted, watching. David play with his plastic spoon. But Jess, you should see how he is with David. It's not fake concern or some rich guy's guilt complex. He genuinely cares about what happens to him, to us. Have you considered that maybe he's not just some random stranger? Jessica asked. I mean, what are the odds that you'd find the business card of the one CEO in the city who'd actually respond to that kind of message? Maybe there's more to this story than you know. Maya had been wondering the same thing, but she'd been afraid to voice the suspicion aloud. Like what? I don't know, Jessica replied, but people don't usually go to these lengths for complete strangers. There's usually a reason, a connection, something personal that motivates them. Maybe you should ask him directly. After hanging up with Jessica, Maya spent the evening researching Ryan Mitchell more thoroughly than she had before. She found the same professional information, but this time she looked for personal details that might explain his behavior. Most of the articles focused on his business acumen and company growth, but she finally found a brief mention in a 3-year-old newspaper piece about local entrepreneurs. The article noted that Ryan was unmarried and had no children, but it also mentioned that he'd lost both parents in a car accident when he was in college and had been raised by his grandmother until her death 5 years ago. The information painted a picture of someone who understood loss and isolation, but it still didn't explain his specific interest in David's welfare. Maya found herself more curious than ever about the man who'd walked into her life at exactly the moment she'd needed help most. She decided that if the interview went well and she got the job, she'd find a way to ask him directly about his motivations. She deserved to understand why her life had suddenly taken such an unexpected turn. The next morning, Maya called Jennifer Harrison, Ryan's assistant, and was surprised by the warmth in the woman's voice when she explained who she was. "Oh, Maya," Jennifer said immediately. "Mr. Mitchell said you'd be calling. I have to say, he spoke very highly of you, which is unusual. He's not typically given to personal recommendations." They scheduled the interview for that afternoon, and Jennifer provided details about the position that made Maya's head spin. The salary was nearly double what she'd been making at the law firm. The health benefits were comprehensive, and the company even provided on-site childcare for employees who needed it. "Mr. Mitchell insisted I mention the childcare," Jennifer added. "He said it was particularly relevant to your situation." Maya spent the morning preparing for the interview with a thoroughness that bordered on obsessive. She researched the company's client base, recent projects, and organizational structure. She pressed her best outfit and practiced answers to potential questions. Most importantly, she arranged for Mrs. Rodriguez from downstairs to watch David, not wanting to risk another emergency during such a crucial meeting. When Maya arrived at Mitchell & Associates that afternoon, she was struck by the understated elegance of the offices. The space was modern and professional without being ostentatious, with an atmosphere that felt more collaborative than hierarchical. Jennifer Harrison turned out to be a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and an efficient manner that immediately put Maya at ease. "Mr. Mitchell is running a few minutes late," Jennifer explained, leading Maya to a comfortable seating area. "But I can tell you that this interview is largely a formality. He's already decided he wants to offer you the position." Maya's surprise must have shown on her face because Jennifer smiled knowingly. It's unusual for him to make hiring decisions so quickly, but Mr. Mitchell has excellent instincts about people. In the 8 years I've worked for him, I've never known him to be wrong about character. When Ryan finally appeared, he was every inch the professional CEO Maya had expected from her online research. His suit was perfectly tailored, his manner confident and decisive. But when he greeted her, Maya caught a glimpse of the same warmth she'd seen in her apartment, the genuine concern that seemed to underlie his more formal exterior. The interview itself was unlike any Maya had experienced. Rather than focusing solely on her qualifications and experience, Ryan asked about her problem-solving approaches, her priorities, and her long-term goals. He seemed particularly interested in how she managed multiple responsibilities under pressure, referencing her experience as a single mother in ways that suggested he viewed it as a professional asset rather than a potential complication. The position involves significant responsibility, Ryan explained. You'd be managing my calendar, handling confidential communications, coordinating with department heads, and serving as a liaison with our major clients. It requires discretion, adaptability, and the ability to anticipate needs before they become problems. Maya listened carefully, asking clarifying questions that demonstrated her genuine interest in the role beyond just the salary and benefits. She found herself responding to Ryan's questions with a confidence she hadn't felt in months, as if his obvious belief in her capabilities was calling forth strength she'd forgotten she possessed. "I have to ask," Maya said toward the end of the interview, "why me? I mean, I'm grateful for the opportunity, but there must be dozens of candidates with more relevant experience." Ryan leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Experience can be taught," he said. "Character can't. You've demonstrated loyalty, determination, and grace under pressure. Those qualities are worth more than any amount of technical experience." He paused. "Besides, sometimes the best person for a job is someone who genuinely needs it to work out." The comment struck Maya as particularly insightful, suggesting an understanding of motivation that went beyond typical corporate thinking. She left the interview with a job offer, a start date the following Monday, and a growing sense that her connection to Ryan Mitchell was more complex than a simple case of charitable intervention. Over the weekend, as Maya prepared for her new position and arranged David's enrollment in the company's childcare program, she found herself thinking constantly about the strange series of events that had brought her to this point. The more she considered it, the more convinced she became that there was something Ryan wasn't telling her, some deeper reason for his involvement in her life. She thought about Jessica's suggestion that maybe Ryan wasn't the random stranger he appeared to be, and Maya found herself wondering if their paths had crossed before, perhaps in some way she didn't remember or hadn't recognized at the time. The business card she'd found could have been dropped by anyone, but what if it hadn't been accidental? What if it had been meant for her to find, part of some larger pattern she didn't yet understand? As Maya put David to bed Sunday night, she made a decision. She would accept Ryan's help and take the job he'd offered, but she wouldn't stop questioning his motivations. She deserved to understand why a successful businessman had chosen to involve himself so deeply in the life of a struggling single mother. Whatever the truth was, she was determined to uncover it, even if it meant risking the stability she'd finally found. The mystery of Ryan Mitchell had become as important to Maya as the practical benefits of his assistance. She sensed that understanding his true motivations would reveal something crucial, not just about him, but about her own past and the forces that had shaped her current circumstances. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Maya's last conscious thought was a promise to herself that she would find the answers she needed, no matter how long it took or how uncomfortable the truth might prove to be. Maya's first day at Mitchell & Associates began at 7:30 in the morning, an hour earlier than she'd expected, but one that Jennifer had insisted was necessary to prepare for Ryan's demanding schedule. The company's childcare center opened at 7, allowing Maya to settle David with the cheerful staff before making her way to the executive floor with nervous anticipation churning in her stomach. The transition from struggling single mother to executive assistant felt surreal as Maya sat at her new desk, a sleek workstation positioned strategically outside Ryan's corner office. Jennifer had spent the previous Friday afternoon walking her through the basics, but Maya quickly discovered that no amount of preparation could fully capture the complexity of managing a CEO's professional life. Ryan arrived at 8 o'clock, sharp, moving through the office with the focused energy of someone accustomed to making every minute count. He greeted Maya with a brief nod and a professional smile that gave no hint of their previous personal interactions. "Good morning, Maya. Jennifer left detailed notes about today's schedule, but I'd like to review everything together in 10 minutes. Maya watched him disappear into his office, struck by the complete transformation from the gentle man who'd sat in her living room to this decisive business leader. She wondered if she'd imagined the warmth in his eyes during their previous encounters, or if this professional distance was simply how he maintained boundaries in the workplace. Their morning briefing covered a packed agenda of conference calls, client meetings, and strategic planning sessions. Ryan explained each item with clinical precision, but Maya noticed he paused occasionally to gauge her understanding, ensuring she felt prepared rather than overwhelmed. "The most important thing to remember," he said as they concluded the review, "is that you're not just managing my schedule, you're protecting my time, and by extension the company's resources. Don't hesitate to make decisions that serve that goal." The first week passed in a blur of learning curves and small victories. Maya discovered she had an intuitive understanding of priorities, often anticipating Ryan's needs before he voiced them. She reorganized his filing system using principles she'd developed during her law firm days, implemented a more efficient communication protocol with department heads, and even identified scheduling conflicts that Jennifer had missed during her final weeks. What surprised Maya most was how naturally she adapted to the corporate environment. The skills she'd developed managing her own chaotic life translated perfectly to organizing someone else's professional demands. Her experience juggling multiple responsibilities while caring for David had taught her to think several steps ahead, to prepare for contingencies, and to remain calm under pressure. Ryan seemed to notice her competence with growing appreciation. By Thursday, he was including her in client meetings, not just as an observer, but as an active participant, asking for her input on scheduling, logistics, and resource allocation. "Maya has an excellent perspective on operational efficiency," he told a major client during a video conference, making her flush with pride at the unexpected recognition. It was during the second week that Maya began to sense undercurrents in the office that she hadn't initially noticed. Several employees made comments about Ryan's improved mood, his increased patience with minor mistakes, and his willingness to engage in casual conversation rather than limiting interactions to strictly business matters. "He's been different since you started," observed Marcus Webb, the company's technical director, during a brief hallway encounter. "More relaxed, if that makes sense, like he's not carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders anymore." Maya filed away these observations, adding them to her growing list of questions about Ryan's motivations and behavior. She'd been watching him carefully during their daily interactions, looking for clues about his personal investment in her success. But his professional demeanor revealed little about his inner thoughts. The breakthrough came during Maya's third week, when a family emergency forced her to leave work early to pick up David from the childcare center. The 8-month-old had developed a fever, and while it wasn't serious enough to warrant a hospital visit, the center's policy required immediate parental pickup. Maya knocked on Ryan's office door with considerable trepidation, knowing she was about to test the flexibility he'd promised during her interview. "Come in," Ryan called, looking up from his laptop as Maya entered with obvious reluctance. "What's wrong? You look concerned." "David has a fever," Maya explained quickly. "The childcare center needs me to pick him up immediately. I know we have the Morrison presentation tomorrow, and I haven't finished formatting the slides, but I can work from home tonight if you need me to. Ryan's response surprised her with its immediacy and concern. How high is his fever? Have you spoken to his pediatrician? The questions came out before any consideration of work implications, revealing priorities that struck Maya as more parental than managerial. It's low grade, probably just a cold, Maya assured him. But you know how it is with babies. Everything seems scary when they're not feeling well. She paused, realizing what she'd said. I mean, I know you don't have children, but you understand what I mean. Something flickered across Ryan's expression so quickly that Maya almost missed it. Pain, perhaps, or recognition of something she couldn't identify. Go, he said immediately. Take care of David. The presentation can wait, and frankly, you've already done most of the heavy lifting on it anyway. Maya gathered her things with grateful efficiency, but as she reached the door, Ryan's voice stopped her. Maya, he said, his tone softer than his usual business register, if David gets worse, if you need anything, call me directly. Don't worry about work protocols or appropriate boundaries. Just call. The offer struck Maya as extraordinarily personal, especially coming from someone who maintained such professional distance in other contexts. She turned back to study his face, looking for clues about the source of his obvious concern. Thank you, she said finally. But can I ask why you're so worried about David specifically? I mean, you've been incredibly supportive, more than any employer should be, really. Ryan was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against his desk in a pattern Maya was beginning to recognize as a sign of internal conflict. Children are vulnerable, he said eventually. They depend on adults to protect them, to make sure they're safe and healthy. Sometimes adults fail at that responsibility, and the consequences can be... He trailed off, shaking his head. Just take care of him, Maya. Everything else can wait. Maya left the office with more questions than answers, but also with a growing certainty that Ryan's investment in David's welfare was deeply personal rather than professionally motivated. She thought about his words during the drive to the childcare center, particularly his comment about adults failing in their protective responsibilities. There was too much emotion in his voice for it to be a general philosophical statement. David's fever broke overnight, allowing Maya to return to work the next morning with a healthy baby and a renewed determination to understand her employer's mysterious motivations. She found Ryan already in his office despite the early hour, working on the Morrison presentation with an attention to detail that suggested he'd been there for quite some time. "How's David?" he asked immediately upon seeing her, before any greeting or discussion of work matters. The question confirmed Maya's growing suspicion that his concern went far beyond normal professional courtesy. "Much better," Maya replied, settling at her desk and logging into her computer. Kids bounced back quickly. He was laughing and playing by bedtime like nothing had happened. Ryan nodded with visible relief, then seemed to catch himself displaying too much emotion. "Good," he said more formally. "I finished the Morrison presentation last night. I'd like you to review it for any formatting issues, but the content is solid." Maya opened the presentation file and immediately noticed something that made her pause. Ryan had included several slides about the company's commitment to employee welfare and family support, topics that hadn't been part of their original outline. The section detailed Mitchell & Associates' childcare benefits, flexible scheduling policies, and emergency leave provisions with a thoroughness that seemed designed to impress the client with the company's values rather than its technical capabilities. "The family support section is new," Maya observed, scrolling through the additional slides. "It's well written, but I'm not sure Morrison Industries will see the relevance to their technical consulting needs." Ryan looked up from his laptop with an expression Maya couldn't quite read. "Family stability directly impacts employee performance and retention," he said matter-of-factly. Companies that support their workers' personal responsibilities tend to attract better talent and maintain lower turnover rates. It's a legitimate business advantage. Maya nodded, accepting the explanation while noting that Ryan seemed to have developed these policies with unusual specificity and personal investment. She spent the morning refining the presentation, but her attention kept drifting to questions about Ryan's background and the experiences that had shaped his management philosophy. The Morrison meeting went exceptionally well, with the client expressing particular interest in Mitchell & Associates' employee-centered approach to business operations. It's refreshing to work with a company that understands the human element, Morrison's CEO commented during the closing discussion. Too many firms treat workers as replaceable resources rather than valuable individuals with complex lives. Ryan accepted the praise with characteristic professionalism, but Maya noticed his satisfaction seemed deeper than typical business success. He appeared genuinely pleased that his company's values had resonated with the client, as if the recognition validated something personally important to him. Following the meeting, Maya found herself working late to catch up on tasks that had been postponed due to David's illness. The office gradually emptied as evening approached, leaving her alone with Ryan, who showed no signs of leaving despite the late hour. She was formatting correspondence when she heard him on a phone call in his office, his voice carrying more emotion than she'd ever heard him express. "I can't make it tonight, Dr. Reeves," Ryan was saying. "I know it's the anniversary, and I know how important these sessions are, but I have responsibilities here that I can't abandon." There was a pause, followed by Ryan's voice again, quieter and strained. "No, it's not about avoiding the conversation. It's about priorities. Some things matter more than my personal healing process." Maya tried not to listen, but the open office layout made privacy difficult. She heard fragments of what seemed to be a difficult conversation about therapy, anniversaries, and emotional avoidance. When Ryan finally ended the call, Maya heard him sigh heavily, followed by the sound of a desk drawer opening and closing. Curiosity overrode her respect for privacy, and Maya found herself approaching Ryan's office with the excuse of delivering completed correspondence. She knocked softly on the doorframe, noting that Ryan was holding a small framed photograph she'd never seen before. When he looked up, his expression was raw with grief that he quickly attempted to hide. "I'm sorry," Maya said immediately. "I don't mean to intrude. I just wanted to give you these letters for tomorrow's mail." She held out the papers, but her attention was drawn to the photograph in Ryan's hands. She could see only the edge of it, but it appeared to show a young child. Ryan accepted the letters while carefully placing the photograph face down on his desk. "Thank you," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "You should go home to David. It's getting late." Maya hesitated, recognizing a moment of vulnerability that might provide answers to her persistent questions. "Ryan," she said carefully, using his first name for the first time in a work context. "I don't want to overstep, but if you need to talk about something, I'm a good listener. You've been there for me when I needed help. Maybe I can return the favor." Ryan looked up at her with surprise that gradually shifted to something like gratitude. "It's complicated, Maya, and personal, probably not appropriate for the workplace." "After hours," Maya pointed out, "and you've already made our relationship more personal than most employer-employee dynamics. I know you're carrying something heavy, and I know it's connected to why you've helped David and me. Maybe talking about it would help." Ryan was quiet for a long time, clearly wrestling with the decision to maintain his privacy or accept Maya's offer of support. Finally, he gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Close the door," he said quietly, "and understand that what I'm about to tell you changes things between us. Once you know, we can't go back to simple professional boundaries." Maya closed the door and settled into the chair, her heart racing with anticipation and concern. She sensed she was about to learn something that would explain not just Ryan's behavior, but possibly the entire sequence of events that had brought her into his life. Ryan picked up the photograph again, studying it for a moment before turning. It's so Maya could see. The image showed a young boy, perhaps 3 or 4 years old, with Ryan's dark hair and bright, intelligent eyes. The child was laughing at something off camera, his joy captured in perfect clarity by whoever had taken the picture. His name was Connor, Ryan said softly. My son. He would have been 8 next month. The past tense hit Maya like a physical blow, explaining so much about Ryan's behavior toward David, his emotional investment in her child's welfare, and the grief she'd glimpsed in unguarded moments. I didn't know you had a son, Maya whispered, her heart breaking for the loss written so clearly on Ryan's face. What happened to him? Ryan was quiet for several minutes, his fingers tracing the edge of the photograph with gentle precision. Asthma attack, he said finally. Severe and sudden. Connor had been diagnosed when he was 2, like David, but we'd managed it well for years. Sarah, my wife, was excellent about monitoring his triggers, maintaining his medication schedule, recognizing the early warning signs. Maya felt a chill of recognition, understanding beginning to dawn about why Ryan had responded so immediately to her desperate text about David's medication. When did it happen? She asked gently. 3 years ago, Ryan replied. Sarah was out of town visiting her mother, and I was supposed to pick Connor up from daycare. But I had a client crisis, a major deal that was falling apart, and I sent my assistant instead. Connor seemed fine when he got home, just a little tired, so I put him down for a nap while I finished some urgent calls. Maya could see where the story was heading, and her heart ached for the guilt and regret Ryan must have carried since that day. You couldn't have known, she said softly. Couldn't I? Ryan's voice was sharp with self-recrimination. I was his father. I should have noticed that his breathing was different, that he was struggling more than usual. Instead, I was focused on work, on a contract negotiation that seemed critically important at the time. When I finally checked on him an hour later, he was barely conscious. The paramedic said if I'd called even 15 minutes earlier. Ryan couldn't finish the sentence, but Maya understood. She thought about her own panic when David had struggled to breathe, her desperation when she couldn't afford his medication, and she tried to imagine the horror of losing him due to her own inattention. I'm so sorry, she said, the words feeling inadequate for the magnitude of his loss. Sarah blamed me, Ryan continued. Not publicly, not in front of others, but I could see it in her eyes every day. She'd trusted me to keep Connor safe, and I'd failed. We tried counseling, tried to work through the grief together, but the marriage couldn't survive what I'd done. She moved back to Oregon 2 years ago. We haven't spoken since the divorce was finalized. Maya began to understand the isolation Ryan had constructed around himself, the way he'd thrown himself into work to avoid confronting his guilt and loss. Is that why you helped us? She asked. Because of Connor? Ryan nodded slowly. When I got your text about David needing asthma medication, it was like the universe was offering me a chance to do what I should have done for my own son. I couldn't save Connor, but maybe I could save David. Maybe I could be the person I should have been 3 years ago. The revelation recontextualized everything about their relationship, from Ryan's immediate response to her text, to his insistence on providing comprehensive medical care for David. And the job offer, Maya asked. Partly selfish, Ryan admitted. Having you and David here, seeing him healthy and thriving, it helps me remember that not every story ends tragically. That sometimes intervention comes in time. Sometimes people get the help they need. He paused. But also because you deserve stability, and David deserves security. I couldn't provide that for Connor, but I can provide it for him. Maya felt tears forming as she processed the depth of Ryan's pain and the generosity with which he'd channeled his guilt into helping her family. Ryan, you can't blame yourself for Connor's death. Accidents happen, medical emergencies happen, even to the most attentive parents. Can't I? Ryan's smile was bitter. I made a choice that day, Maya. I chose work over my child's immediate welfare. I chose a business deal over being present for the person who needed me most. That choice killed my son as surely as if I'd physically harmed him. Maya shook her head firmly. That's not true, and you know it. Asthma attacks can be unpredictable and severe. Even if you'd been watching him every second, the outcome might have been the same. You're torturing yourself with what-ifs that don't change the reality of what happened. Perhaps, Ryan conceded, but the guilt remains. The knowledge that I failed when it mattered most. That's why your situation triggered such a strong response. When I saw David struggling to breathe, when I realized you couldn't afford his medication, it was like getting a second chance to make the right choice. Maya understood now why Ryan had seemed so personally invested in David's welfare. Why he'd gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure their stability and security. His generosity wasn't random charity, but a form of penance, an attempt to atone for perceived failures with his own child. What was Connor like? Maya asked, sensing that Ryan needed to talk about his son as a living person rather than just a source of guilt and regret. Ryan's expression softened immediately, grief mixing with genuine love and pride. Brilliant, he said without hesitation. Curious about everything, always asking questions I couldn't answer. He wanted to be a scientist when he grew up, specifically a marine biologist. We spent hours at the aquarium talking about ocean life and conservation. Ryan laughed softly. He could identify dozens of fish species by the time he was 4. His pediatrician said his verbal skills were years ahead of his age. Maya smiled, imagining a younger version of Ryan patiently answering endless questions from an inquisitive toddler. He sounds wonderful. I wish I could have met him. He would have loved David, Ryan said with certainty. Connor was fascinated by babies. He always wanted to help. When we visited friends with young children, very gentle and protective. I think he would have been an amazing big brother if we'd had more children. The wistfulness in Ryan's voice made Maya's heart ache for all the lost possibilities, the family moments that would never happen, the relationship with David that Connor would never have. David would have loved him too, she said softly. He's drawn to older children. There's something about their energy that fascinates him. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, both lost in their own thoughts about children and loss, and the strange connections that brought people together in times of need. Finally, Ryan looked up at Maya with an expression of gratitude mixed with uncertainty. Thank you for listening, he said quietly. I haven't talked about Connor with anyone in over a year. My therapist keeps pushing me to process the grief more actively, but it's easier to just focus on work and avoid the emotional complications. Avoiding grief doesn't make it disappear, Maya observed gently. It just changes shape and finds other ways to express itself. Sometimes talking helps, even when it's painful. Ryan nodded thoughtfully. Dr. Reeves says something similar. She thinks I'm using work as a way to avoid confronting my guilt and processing the loss. She's probably right, but work feels safer than emotions. Maya considered her next words carefully, not wanting to overstep but feeling compelled to offer support. Maybe the answer isn't choosing between work and healing. Maybe it's finding ways to honor Connor's memory that don't require you to carry so much guilt. You've already started doing that by helping David and me. Perhaps, Ryan agreed. But it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't bring Connor back or repair the damage I caused. Maya leaned forward, her voice firm with conviction. No, but it prevents other children from suffering unnecessarily. It gives families like mine opportunities we wouldn't have had otherwise. Connor's death was a tragedy, but your response to that tragedy has created positive change. That matters. Ryan, that honors his memory in a meaningful way. Ryan studied her face as if seeing her clearly for the first time. You're remarkable, Maya. Your ability to find hope and meaning in difficult circumstances, your strength in facing challenges that would overwhelm most people. Connor would have liked you very much. The compliment moved Maya deeply, but she also recognized the deflection in Ryan's words. I'm not remarkable, she said simply. I'm just someone who's learned that survival requires finding reasons to keep moving forward. You've done the same thing, even if you don't recognize it. Ryan was quiet for a long moment, then glanced at his watch with surprise. It's nearly 9 o'clock. You should go home to David. He'll be wondering where you are. Maya rose from her chair, but hesitated before leaving. Ryan, what you've shared tonight, it doesn't change anything about our working relationship unless you want it to. But I hope you know that if you ever need someone to talk about Connor or about anything else, I'm here. Not as your employee, but as someone who cares about your well-being. Ryan nodded, his expression softer than Maya had ever seen it. Thank you. That means more than you know. He paused. Maya, there's something else you should understand. My investment in your success, in David's welfare, it's not just about assuaging guilt. You've both become important to me in ways I didn't expect. This started as an attempt to make amends for my failures with Connor, but it's evolved into something more personal. Maya felt her pulse quicken at the admission, uncertain how to interpret the emotional undertones in Ryan's voice. What do you mean? I mean that somewhere along the way, helping you and David stopped being about Connor and started being about the two of you specifically. About wanting to see David grow up healthy and happy, about wanting to support your dreams and ambitions, about caring what happens to both of you for your own sakes, not just as symbols of what I couldn't do for my son. The revelation hung between them, laden with implications that neither seemed quite ready to address directly. Maya felt the shift in their relationship, the movement from professional association to something more complex and emotionally significant. I care about what happens to you too, Maya said softly. These past few weeks, watching you interact with David, seeing your kindness and generosity, it's made me realize there's so much more to you than the successful businessman everyone sees. You're a good man, Ryan, regardless of what happened with Connor. Ryan's eyes brightened with something that looked like hope, mixed with lingering uncertainty. I'm glad you see it that way. Sometimes it's hard to remember who I was before the guilt and grief took over. Maya smiled, recognizing the vulnerability it took for Ryan to admit such deep uncertainties about his own character. Maybe it's not about remembering who you were. Maybe it's about discovering who you're becoming. People change, especially after profound loss. The question is whether that change leads toward healing or deeper isolation. And which direction do you think I'm heading? Ryan asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Maya considered the question seriously, thinking about Ryan's actions over the past month, his growing openness with her, his willingness to share his pain and accept support. I think you're braver than you give yourself credit for. You're allowing people back into your life despite the risk of more loss. That takes courage. Ryan stood and moved around his desk, stopping just close enough to Maya that she could see the gratitude and something deeper in his expression. Thank you, he said quietly, for listening, for understanding, for not judging me for my failures, for helping me remember that human connection is worth the risk of pain. Maya felt the weight of the moment, the sense that their relationship had fundamentally shifted towards something more honest and emotionally complex. Thank you for trusting me with Connor's story, for letting me understand why you've been so generous with David and me. It makes everything clearer. As Maya gathered her things to leave, she realized that the mystery she'd been so determined to solve had revealed something far more profound than she'd expected. Ryan's motivations weren't mysterious at all. They were heartbreakingly human. His actions stemmed from love and loss, and the desperate desire to prevent other families from experiencing the tragedy that had shattered his own. But more than that, Maya recognized that their connection had evolved beyond Ryan's initial guilt-driven intervention. What had started as his attempt to atone for perceived failures with Connor had grown into genuine care and affection for her, and David as individuals. The realization filled her with warmth and hope, but also with the recognition that their relationship was becoming something that would require careful navigation. As she drove home through the quiet streets, Maya thought about Ryan alone in his office, probably staring at Connor's photograph and wrestling with emotions he'd kept buried for 3 years. She thought about the courage it had taken for him to share his story, to admit his vulnerabilities and accept her offer of support. Most of all, she thought about the future and the possibility that two people wounded by loss might help each other heal in unexpected ways. The weeks following, Ryan's revelation about Connor brought a subtle but profound shift in the atmosphere at Mitchell & Associates. Maya found herself watching Ryan with new understanding, recognizing the grief that occasionally flickered across his features when he thought no one was looking. She also noticed how his interactions with the company's childcare center had become more frequent, often stopping by to check on the facilities or chat with the staff about the children's needs. Maya's own perspective on their relationship had evolved as well. What she'd initially interpreted as unusual generosity now made perfect sense through the lens of Ryan's loss. His attention to David's medical needs, his insistence on comprehensive healthcare benefits, even his patient explanations of company policies, all reflected a man trying to create the safety net he wished had existed for his own family. The transformation wasn't one-sided. Maya observed Ryan becoming more present in daily office life, engaging in casual conversations with employees he'd previously acknowledged only in passing. His leadership style remained decisive and professional, but the harsh edges had softened into something more collaborative and emotionally intelligent. During David's regular checkup in November, Dr. Patel remarked on the improvement in both the baby's health and Maya's demeanor. "Whatever changes you've made in your life, they're working," the pediatrician observed. "David's asthma is well controlled, his development is excellent, and you seem much less stressed than during our previous visits." Maya smiled, thinking of the stability that Ryan's intervention had brought to their lives. "We've had some positive changes recently. Better healthcare, less financial pressure, a more supportive work environment. It shows," Dr. Patel replied. "Stress affects children more than most parents realize. David is benefiting from your improved circumstances as much as from his medical care." The comment stayed with Maya throughout the day, reinforcing her gratitude for Ryan's role in their transformation. She'd gone from desperate single mother texting strangers for help to confident professional with a secure future. And while her own determination had played a part, Ryan's support had made the change possible. That evening, as Maya prepared to leave the office, she noticed Ryan's light still on despite the late hour. This had become a pattern since their conversation about Connor, as if sharing his story had disrupted his ability to lose himself in work as completely as before. Maya knocked softly on his door, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the break room. "Thought you might need this," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. The formal distance they'd maintained immediately after his revelation had gradually given way to a more comfortable familiarity, though both remained careful not to overstep professional boundaries. Ryan accepted the coffee with visible gratitude. "Thank you. I've been trying to finish the quarterly reports, but my concentration seems to have abandoned me." He rubbed his temples with obvious frustration. "I used to be able to work for 12 hours straight without distraction. Lately, I find my mind wandering to other things." Maya suspected she knew what those other things might be, but she didn't press. Instead, she asked, "Have you given any more thought to Dr. Reeves's suggestion about attending the grief support group?" Ryan had mentioned his therapist's recommendation during one of their recent conversations, though he'd expressed considerable reluctance about participating in group counseling. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of public emotional processing," he admitted. "The idea of discussing Connor's death with strangers feels overwhelming." "Maybe it's not about being ready," Maya suggested gently. "Maybe it's about being willing to try something that might help, even if it feels uncomfortable initially." Ryan was quiet for several minutes, staring out the window at the city lights below. "Sarah used to say that I was too comfortable with isolation, that I preferred solving problems alone rather than accepting help from others. She was probably right about that." Maya had heard Ryan mention his ex-wife only briefly during their previous conversations, and she sensed there were layers of guilt and regret surrounding that relationship as well. "It's not easy to change patterns that have felt protective," she observed, "but isolation only works until it doesn't." "Meaning?" Ryan asked, though his tone suggested he already understood her implication. "Meaning that eventually, the walls we build to protect ourselves become prisons that limit our ability to heal and grow." Maya paused, choosing her words carefully. "You've already started breaking down some of those walls by helping David and me, by sharing Connor's story. Maybe the support group is just the next step in that process." Ryan nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps you're right. Dr. Reeves certainly thinks so. She's been pushing me toward group therapy for months, claiming that individual sessions have reached their effectiveness limit." "What's the worst that could happen?" Maya asked. "You try it, decide it's not helpful, and stop going. But what if it actually helps? What if connecting with other people who understand your loss provides something individual therapy can't?" The question hung between them as Ryan considered the possibilities. Maya could see him weighing his habitual self-protection against the potential benefits of vulnerability, an internal struggle she recognized from her own difficult decisions over the past months. "There's something else," Ryan said eventually. "Dr. Reeves thinks I should consider dating again, forming new relationships rather than remaining emotionally isolated. She believes my investment in your and David's welfare might be preparation for accepting love and family back into my life." Maya felt her pulse quicken at the admission, uncertain how to respond to the implications. Their relationship had grown increasingly personal, but they'd both been careful to maintain appropriate boundaries, given their professional dynamic and Ryan's obvious emotional fragility. "What do you think about that?" Maya asked carefully, not wanting to presume anything about his feelings or intentions. Ryan met her gaze directly, his expression serious and vulnerable. "I think Dr. Reeves might be right about my motivations, even if I wasn't conscious of them initially. Helping you and David has reminded me what it feels like to care about people beyond myself, to invest in someone else's happiness and well-being." Maya felt her breath catch at the honesty in his voice. "And how does that feel?" "Terrifying," Ryan admitted with a rueful smile, "but also more fulfilling than anything I've experienced since losing Connor. Watching David grow and thrive, seeing you succeed professionally and personally, it gives me a sense of purpose I'd forgotten was possible." The confession created a moment of charged silence, as both Maya and Ryan acknowledged the shift in their relationship from professional courtesy to genuine emotional connection. Maya found herself torn between excitement at the possibility of something deeper with Ryan and concern about the complications such a relationship might create. "Ryan," Maya said softly, "I need you to know that whatever happens between us personally, I'm grateful for everything you've done for David and me. You've changed our lives in ways I can never adequately repay." "You don't owe me anything," Ryan replied immediately. "If anything, you and David have given me more than I've given you. You've shown me that life continues after devastating loss, that healing is possible even when it seems impossible." Before Maya could respond, her phone chimed with a text message from Mrs. Rodriguez, who was watching David for the evening. Maya glanced at the screen and immediately felt her heart sink. "David's running a fever again," she said, already reaching for her purse. "I need to go." Ryan stood immediately, his concern obvious and immediate. "How high? Do you need me to call Dr. Patel?" "I don't know yet," Maya replied, gathering her things with efficient speed. "Mrs. Rodriguez just said he feels warm and seems fussy. It's probably nothing serious, but with his asthma history, I don't want to take chances." "I'll drive you," Ryan offered without hesitation. "You're too worried to focus on traffic safely." Maya wanted to protest that she was perfectly capable of driving herself home, but the genuine concern in Ryan's voice and her own anxiety about David's condition made her accept the offer gratefully. They left the office together, Ryan pausing only to grab his coat and keys before following Maya to the elevator. The drive to Maya's apartment passed in tense silence, both of them lost in their own worried thoughts about David's health. Maya found herself gripping her phone tightly, fighting the urge to call Mrs. Rodriguez for constant updates during the 20-minute journey. When they arrived at Maya's building, Ryan insisted on accompanying her upstairs despite her protests, that it wasn't necessary. "Please," he said simply, "I need to see that David's okay, for my own peace of mind." Mrs. Rodriguez met them at the door with David in her arms, the baby clearly uncomfortable but alert and responsive. "His fever started about an hour ago," she explained, transferring David to Maya's arms. "I gave him some infant acetaminophen, but it hasn't had time to work yet." Maya immediately noticed the warmth radiating from David's small body and the slight congestion in his breathing that made her stomach clench with familiar fear. "Has he been coughing?" she asked, already moving toward the cabinet where she kept his rescue inhaler. "A little," Mrs. Rodriguez replied. "Nothing severe, but I thought you should know right away." Ryan watched the interaction with obvious tension, his hands clenched at his sides as if restraining himself from taking action. Maya recognized the expression from their previous conversations about Connor, the helpless fear of a parent watching their child struggle with a medical condition beyond their immediate control. Maya administered David's rescue inhaler with practiced efficiency, then settled into her rocking chair to monitor his response to the medication. Ryan remained standing near the door, clearly wanting to help but unsure what role he should play. "In this family crisis, you can sit down," Maya said gently, gesturing toward the couch. "This might take a while. The fever reducer needs time to work, and I want to make sure his breathing stays stable." Ryan settled onto the couch with obvious reluctance, his attention fixed entirely on David's condition. "Should we call Dr. Patel?" he asked, "or consider taking him to the emergency room?" "Not yet," Maya replied, though she appreciated Ryan's willingness to err on the side of caution. "His breathing is stable, and the fever isn't dangerously high. I'll monitor him closely for the next hour and reassess if there's no improvement." They sat in comfortable silence as David gradually relaxed in Maya's arms, his breathing becoming less labored as the rescue medication took effect. Ryan watched the process with fascination and obvious relief, his expression softening as David's discomfort visibly decreased. "He's looking better," Ryan observed after about 30 minutes. His color is improving, and he seems more comfortable. Maya nodded, feeling her own tension begin to ease as David's fever started to break and his breathing normalized. The medication usually works pretty quickly once it gets into his system. The trick is recognizing when he needs it before the symptoms become severe. How did you learn to manage his condition so effectively? Ryan asked. The way you handled this crisis, the calm competence, it's impressive. Maya smiled at the compliment while continuing to rock David gently. Necessity and experience. The first few episodes were terrifying because I didn't know what to expect or how to help him. But Dr. Patel taught me to recognize the warning signs and respond quickly rather than panicking. You're an excellent mother, Ryan said softly, his voice carrying deep respect and admiration. David is lucky to have someone so attentive and caring. The compliment brought tears to Maya's eyes, touching on her deepest fears about her adequacy as a single parent. I try my best, but sometimes I feel like I'm just making it up as I go along. Parenting is so much harder than I expected, especially when you're doing it alone. Ryan was quiet for several minutes, his expression thoughtful and distant. Sarah used to say similar things about feeling unprepared for parenthood. Even with two parents, raising Connor felt overwhelming sometimes. I can't imagine managing it alone, especially with the added complexity of a chronic medical condition. Maya heard the pain in Ryan's voice as he spoke about his family, the lingering grief that colored every reference to his previous life. Tell me about Connor as a baby, she said gently. What was he like when he was David's age? Ryan's expression brightened immediately, grief giving way to parental pride and affection. Incredibly alert and curious, he started crawling at 6 months and walking at 10 months, always eager to explore everything around him. He had this way of studying people's faces with such intensity, like he was trying to figure out what they were thinking. Maya watched Ryan's face as he spoke, noting how his features relaxed and warmed when discussing positive memories of his son. He sounds like he was quite the character. Did he look like you or Sarah? A perfect combination of both, Ryan replied with a smile that reached his eyes for the first time that evening. Sarah's green eyes and my dark hair, but his personality was entirely his own. Fearless and affectionate, always ready for an adventure. David had fallen asleep in Maya's arms, his breathing now completely normal and his fever broken. Maya continued rocking him gently, reluctant to disturb his peaceful rest, but aware that Ryan was opening up about Connor in ways he hadn't before. What was his favorite thing to do? Maya asked softly, encouraging Ryan to continue sharing. Positive memories rather than focusing on the loss. Water, Ryan said immediately. Bath time, swimming pools, even puddles after rainstorms. We spent hours at the beach during summers, building sand castles and looking for shells. He wanted to live underwater, like the fish at the aquarium. Maya could picture a younger Ryan playing in the waves with an enthusiastic toddler, creating the kind of precious family memories that made loss so devastating when they ended. Those sound like wonderful times. I'm glad you have those memories to hold on to. They help, Ryan agreed. Dr. Reeves encourages me to focus on the joy Connor brought to my life, rather than only remembering the tragedy of losing him. It's difficult, but conversations like this make it easier to access the happy memories. Maya recognized the significance of Ryan sharing these intimate recollections with her, understanding that his willingness to discuss Connor represented a major step in his healing process. I hope David gets to experience some of those same adventures as he grows up. Beach. Trips and aquarium visits sound magical for a little boy. Ryan's expression grew thoughtful as he considered Maya's comment. Maybe we could take him sometime, he said carefully. To the aquarium, I mean, when he's a little older and more able to appreciate the experience. The suggestion hung between them, heavy with implications about their future relationship, and Brian's desire to be part of David's life in meaningful ways. Maya felt her heart race at the possibility, while also recognizing the emotional significance of Ryan wanting to share Connor's favorite places with David. I think David would love that, Maya replied softly. And I think Connor would be happy knowing that his favorite places were bringing joy to another little boy. Ryan nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I'd like to believe that's true, that somehow the love I had for Connor can find new expression through caring for David. The admission revealed the depth of Ryan's emotional investment in their family, his desire to channel his parental love in new directions rather than burying it entirely. Maya recognized the courage it took to open his heart to the possibility of loving another child, especially one who wasn't his own. Love doesn't diminish when it's shared, Maya said gently. Caring for David doesn't take anything away from your love for Connor. If anything, it honors that love by allowing it to continue growing and giving. Ryan reached out and gently touched David's tiny hand, his expression soft with wonder and affection. He's amazing, Maya, watching him overcome challenges, seeing his resilience and joy. Despite his medical condition, it's inspiring. You've raised an incredible little boy. Maya felt her heart swell with pride and gratitude, both for Ryan's recognition of David's special qualities and for his genuine affection for her son. He's pretty wonderful, she agreed. Even when he's sick and fussy, he bounces back so quickly. Kids are remarkably resilient. More resilient than adults sometimes, Ryan observed. We tend to hold on to pain and fear longer than necessary, while children just focus on the present moment and what's possible. Maya recognized the self-reflection in Ryan's comment, his growing awareness of how his own grief had limited his ability to embrace new possibilities. Maybe that's something we can learn from them, she suggested, how to stay present and open to what life offers, even after we've experienced loss. Ryan nodded thoughtfully, his hand still resting gently on David's. I think you're right. These past months, watching David grow and seeing you build a new life for both of you, it's taught me things about resilience and hope that I'd forgotten were possible. The intimate moment was interrupted by Maya's phone buzzing with a text from Mrs. Rodriguez, checking on David's condition. Maya quickly replied that the fever had broken and thanked her for her help, then realized how late it had gotten. I should let you go home, Maya said reluctantly. It's past 10, and you have that early meeting tomorrow with the Henderson group. Ryan glanced at his watch with surprise, clearly having lost track of time during their conversation. I don't mind staying longer if you're concerned about David, he offered. I can work from home tomorrow if needed. The offer touched Maya deeply, evidence of how Ryan's priorities had shifted since Connor's death and their growing relationship. That's very sweet, but he's clearly much better now. The crisis has passed. Ryan stood reluctantly, his obvious reluctance to leave making Maya's heart flutter with affection and possibility. Call me if anything changes, he said seriously, even if it's 3 in the morning. I want to know that you and David are okay. Maya nodded, understanding that Ryan's concern went far beyond normal employer consideration. I will. And Ryan, thank you for being here tonight. Having someone who understands the fear that comes with David's condition, it means more than you know. Ryan paused at the door, his expression vulnerable and hopeful. Maya, what I said earlier about Dr. Reeves, encouraging me to consider new relationships, I want you to know that my feelings for you and David aren't just about replacing what I lost with Connor and Sarah. You've both become important to me for who you are, not as substitutes for my previous family. Maya felt her breath catch at the directness of his admission, the clear statement of romantic interest that moved their relationship into new territory. "I care about you too, Ryan. These past months, getting to know you beyond the successful businessman facade, seeing your kindness and vulnerability, it's made me realize how special you are." Ryan's smile was radiant with relief and joy. "I'm glad to hear that. I wasn't sure if my feelings were reciprocated or if I was misreading the connection between us." "You weren't misreading anything," Maya assured him. "But we should probably take things slowly, given the complexity of our situation and David's needs." "Slowly is perfect," Ryan agreed. "We have time to figure out what this means and where it might lead. No pressure, no rush, just the opportunity to explore what's developing between us." As Ryan left the apartment, Maya remained in her rocking chair with David, her mind spinning with the evening's revelations and the possibilities they suggested for her future. Ryan's declaration of feelings, his desire to share Connor's memory with David, and his obvious commitment to their well-being painted a picture of potential happiness that Maya had never dared to imagine. For the first time since David's birth, Maya allowed herself to envision a future that included not just survival and stability, but love and partnership, and the kind of family support she'd always dreamed of providing for her son. The journey from desperate single mother to beloved partner seemed impossible, but then again, so had the idea that a stranger would respond to her plea for help with such generosity and care. As David slept peacefully in her arms, Maya whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude for the unexpected blessings that had transformed their lives and the promise of even greater happiness to come. 6 months later, Maya stood in Ryan's kitchen, preparing breakfast while David played happily in his high chair, babbling excitedly at the colorful toys hanging from the tray. The morning routine had become natural after Ryan asked them to move in 3 months ago, claiming his large house felt empty and that David needed more space to explore safely. The transition hadn't been without challenges. Maya worried about maintaining her independence and David becoming too attached to Ryan, while Ryan struggled with moments of guilt about allowing happiness back into his life. But their relationship had deepened into something genuine and lasting, built on mutual respect, shared values, and Ryan's obvious devotion to both Maya and David. Ryan entered the kitchen dressed for work, automatically stopping to kiss Maya's cheek and ruffle David's hair. The 1-year-old reached up immediately, demanding his morning hug from the man he'd begun calling Rai with adorable enthusiasm. "The Morrison contract came through," Ryan announced, settling David on his lap while Maya finished cooking. "The biggest deal in company history, thanks largely to your organizational skills during the negotiations." Maya smiled, remembering the intense weeks of preparation that had led to yesterday's successful contract signing. "We make a good team," she said simply, though the words carried deeper meaning about their partnership both professionally and personally. "Speaking of teams," Ryan said carefully, "Dr. Reeves thinks I'm ready to reduce our sessions to monthly check-ins. She believes I've processed Connor's death enough to move forward without constant therapeutic support." Maya turned from the stove, recognizing the significance of this milestone in Ryan's healing journey. "How do you feel about that?" "Nervous but hopeful," Ryan admitted, bouncing David gently on his knee. "For the first time since the accident, I can think about the future without being overwhelmed by guilt about the past." The doorbell interrupted their conversation and Maya frowned in confusion. They weren't expecting anyone, and Ryan's expression suggested he was equally puzzled by the early morning visitor. Ryan handed David back to Maya and went to answer the door, returning moments later with a woman Maya didn't recognize. She was petite with copper-colored hair and green eyes that looked remarkably familiar, though Maya couldn't place where she might have seen them before. Maya, Ryan said quietly, his voice carefully controlled, I'd like you to meet Sarah, Connor's mother. Maya felt her stomach drop as she realized she was meeting Ryan's ex-wife, the woman whose grief and blame had ended their marriage after Connor's death. Sarah looked exhausted and fragile, her expensive clothes unable to disguise the emotional weight she carried. I'm sorry to intrude, Sarah said softly, her gaze moving between Maya and David with obvious curiosity. I tried calling, but Ryan's been avoiding my attempts to reach him for months. What do you want, Sarah? Ryan asked, his professional demeanor firmly in place despite the obvious tension. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she looked at David, who was studying her with the frank curiosity of a one-year-old. I heard you were living with someone who has a child. I needed to see for myself. Maya felt protective instincts surge through her as she recognized the pain and perhaps resentment in Sarah's voice. I think I should take David upstairs, she said quietly, not wanting him exposed to what promised to be a difficult conversation. No, Sarah said quickly, please stay. I need to say something to both of you. Ryan moved closer to Maya, his presence offering support and reassurance. Whatever you came to say, Sarah, make it quick. Maya and David don't deserve to be subjected to whatever emotional processing you're working through. Sarah flinched at Ryan's harsh tone, but pressed forward. I came to apologize, she said, her voice breaking slightly. To both of you, but especially to Ryan. I blamed him for Connor's death when I should have recognized that we were both grieving parents who lost our child to a medical tragedy beyond anyone's control. Maya watched Ryan's expression carefully, seeing surprise and pain warring with the protective walls he'd rebuilt around his emotions. Sarah, he said slowly, that's not why our marriage ended. We ended because grief changed us into people who couldn't support each other anymore. I know, Sarah replied, wiping tears from her cheeks. But I made it worse by blaming you instead of accepting that Connor's death was a terrible accident. I've been in therapy for 2 years, trying to understand my own anger and guilt. Maya found herself feeling sympathy for this broken woman, despite her protective feelings toward Ryan. The loss of a child destroyed marriages more often than it strengthened them, and Sarah's pain was clearly as profound as Ryan's had been. Why now? Ryan asked. Why come here after 3 years of silence? Sarah looked directly at David, who was still watching her with innocent curiosity. Because I heard you'd found someone new, someone with a child, and I realized I was jealous. Not of Maya specifically, she added quickly, but of your ability to love again, to allow another child into your heart when I've been frozen in grief for 3 years. Maya felt Ryan tense beside her, understanding that Sarah's words touched on his deepest fears about moving forward with their relationship. Healing happens at different paces for different people, Maya said gently. There's no right timeline for processing loss. Sarah smiled through her tears, the first genuine expression Maya had seen from her. You must be very special to help Ryan open his heart again. He loved Connor so completely that I wasn't sure he'd ever allow himself to care for another child. David isn't a replacement for Connor, Ryan said firmly, and Maya isn't a replacement for you. They're new people who've brought new possibilities into my life. I know, Sarah replied, and I'm glad. Connor would want you to be happy, to love again. I should have told you that years ago instead of making you carry guilt that was never yours to bear. David chose that moment to reach towards Sarah with his characteristic openness to new people, babbling something that sounded like a greeting. Sarah's composure cracked completely as she looked at the happy, healthy child who had captured Ryan's heart. May I? She asked softly, gesturing toward David. Maya hesitated, then nodded, allowing Sarah to take David into her arms. The sight of Connor's mother holding her son created a surprisingly poignant moment of connection between past grief and present hope. He's beautiful, Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Connor would have loved playing with him. Ryan's eyes filled with tears as he watched Sarah interact with David, recognizing perhaps that this moment represented a form of closure neither of them had expected to find. "Sarah," Ryan said quietly, "I forgive you for the blame and anger. I hope you can forgive me for the ways I failed you during our grief." Sarah nodded, carefully transferring David back to Maya's arms. "We both did the best we could with an impossible situation. I'm just sorry it took me so long to realize that Connor's death wasn't anyone's fault." After Sarah left, Maya and Ryan sat in their living room, processing the unexpected encounter. David played contentedly on the floor between them, oblivious to the emotional weight of what had just occurred. "Are you okay?" Maya asked softly, studying Ryan's face for signs of renewed guilt or regret. "I think I am," Ryan replied with surprise. "For 3 years I've carried Sarah's blame alongside my own guilt. Having her acknowledge that Connor's death was a tragedy rather than my failure, it feels like the final piece of healing I needed." Maya reached for his hand, interlacing their fingers with gentle pressure. "So what happens now? Where do we go from here?" Ryan was quiet for several minutes, watching David stack blocks with determined concentration. "Now we build the life we want together," he said finally. "Not as people trying to replace what we've lost, but as people choosing to create something new and meaningful." 3 months later, Maya stood in their backyard watching Ryan push David on the swing set he'd installed the previous weekend. The toddler's delighted squeals filled the air as he soared higher, completely trusting in Ryan's careful attention to his safety. "Higher, Rai!" David demanded with the imperious tone of a confident 15-month-old who knew he was adored. "That's high enough, buddy," Ryan replied with a laugh, gradually slowing the swing to a stop. "We don't want to launch you into orbit." Maya smiled at their easy interaction, marveling at how naturally Ryan had embraced fatherhood, despite his fears about loving another child. David had claimed Ryan's heart completely, while Ryan's patient guidance was helping shape David into a confident, curious little boy. Ryan approached Maya with David in his arms, both of them grass-stained and grinning from their outdoor adventures. "I have something to ask you," Ryan said, his expression suddenly serious, despite his obvious happiness. Maya felt her pulse quicken as Ryan knelt down in front of her, still holding David, who was fascinated by this change in perspective. From his pocket, Ryan withdrew a simple but elegant ring that caught the afternoon sunlight. "Maya Chen," Ryan said formally, "you and David have taught me that love multiplies rather than diminishes when it's shared freely. You've shown me that healing doesn't require forgetting the past, but rather embracing the possibilities of the future." Maya felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she realized what was happening, the moment she'd dreamed about but never quite dared to expect. "Will you marry me?" Ryan continued. "Will you let me be David's father officially and help me build the family I thought I'd lost forever?" "Yes," Maya whispered, then said it again more loudly as joy overwhelmed her ability to speak clearly. "Yes, absolutely, yes." Ryan slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood to embrace both Maya and David in a hug that felt like coming home after a long journey through darkness. David clapped his hands excitedly, not understanding the significance, but responding to the happiness radiating from his 2 favorite adults. "Rai, happy," he announced with satisfaction, making both Maya and Ryan laugh through their tears. As they stood together in their backyard, Maya reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. From a desperate text message to a stranger to a proposal from the man she loved, her life had transformed beyond her wildest dreams. But more than that, she understood that their story wasn't really about rescue or salvation. It was about 2 wounded people choosing to heal together, about the power of love to create new families from the ashes of loss, and about the truth that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings arise from the most desperate moments. Ryan had saved David's life that first night with emergency medication, but Maya and David had saved Ryan's life in return by showing him that joy and love could coexist with grief and memory. Together, they'd built something stronger than either could have created alone. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.